All right, guys. Now, this is an introduction to a philosophy that I've come up with called Spider Bite Venom. And I'm going to try to explain to you a little bit about how I came about this type of philosophy because it's it's a combination of what I learned from Jedi philosophy, Tao philosophy, and Stoic philosophy. And I'm sure everybody's kind of at least familiar with the names, but they might not know exactly uh, how the philosophies in each one of these work. But what you will find out, and what I found out, is that uh, these three philosophies are actually very similar in a lot of ways, maybe different in some ways that really, in my opinion, doesn't. Just more or less minor details. But as far as the philosophy itself, when you apply it to the three main things that you do in your life, um, to me, they seem to work best. And the reason why I like drawing from all three of these type of philosophies is because you can interchange them, but um, as far as what particular area of life that you want to apply it to. But to kind of keep yourself organized, it's good to kind of see which one you feel more comfortable with um, as far as applying to whatever area of your life. And then if you feel like you need to switch it up, you can do that. Um, in my particular situation, I like to uh, use Jedi philosophy when it comes to relationships, and that could be anything between a man and a woman, or between people who you may work with, or people you may have to interact with. Um, Anytime you deal with relationships, it has a lot to do with your ego, and um, and a lot of people don't realize that our relationships um, are pretty binary when you think about it because we're either thinking about ourselves or we're thinking about the other person. And that can be confusing sometimes because a lot of times we're thinking about one particular person, and because we're so focused on that one person, uh, we confuse ourselves, or we make the mistake and believe that we're actually thinking about everybody. And what Jedi philosophy kind of teaches is that you want to think about everybody. Like, even if you are just thinking about one person at a time, you want to think about whatever action that you're going to take, how is that going to affect everybody else? And of course, Jedi philosophy is from the movie Star Wars, obviously. And I'm going to be, using a lot of examples from that from that saga. Not the Disney nonsense, because it's not really considered canon. But as far as one that George Lucas created, the Jedi philosophy is what I'm talking about. And then when you come to Tao philosophy, I like to use that when it comes to health, um, because the Tao philosophy really focuses on balance, even though these three philosophies, like the Jedi philosophy, talks about balance. But the Tao philosophy, even more so, because it 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 basically explains that everything is either male or female, or either um, negative or positive. Everything has an up or down. Everything is either opposite of each other, and the universe really wouldn't uh, work without understanding that principle. And that's a principle of Tao philosophy, is that we have to recognize that if we didn't have light, we wouldn't have darkness. If we didn't have the color white, we wouldn't have the color black. If we didn't have um, you know up, we wouldn't have down. And this really, you know, when you look at everything in that prism, then you'll, especially when you make decisions, um, you'll be able to focus a lot easier on what is the right decision to make, and you'll be able to more or less, I don't want to say predict, but you'll be able to more or less have more insight into what's going to happen. You'll be able to foresee things. You'll be able to see the future. You'll be able to see the past. And even though Jedi philosophy, kind of talks about that too, really a lot of the Jedi philosophy got a lot of its ideas from Tao, or at least they're related. Because when you see how something, constantly is going up, no matter what people will tell you, no matter what the trend is, at some point it's got to come down. And, no matter how dark times may seem like they're, with us, at some point, they're going to get better. And then, no matter how good a relationship may be, again, if you want to interchange this, at some point it's going to have problems. Um, so I like to use Tao again for health, because health is one of those things where you get a lot of these types of gurus, these health fitness coaches and whatnot. And if you can afford a trainer, that's I've had a trainer before. That's a really good idea. But everybody's limited as far as their experience, their knowledge, and even your trainer, even your mentor, whatever, even your doctor. At some point, they're limited by the philosophy that they apply. They may have a lot of knowledge, but they may be limited by the philosophy they practice with that knowledge. So what I found is that when it comes to health, it's all about recognizing that your health will be good, and then at some point it's going to go bad. But you can try to maintain good health if you understand that fact, that the fact that there are certain things that you do, whether you think is positive, is actually going to have a negative effect later on. And that usually has to do with our short-term thinking. We think that that what we eat, for instance, is pleasurable, and it tastes good, and it feels like it's good for us in the moment, but later on down the road, it could cause problems. So understanding that Tao philosophy and applying it when it comes to health, fitness, exercise, things like that, will, in my opinion, help keep a balance. And then Stoic philosophy, I like to use that when it comes to finances. And finances is a lot. It's a lot bigger than just I get paid for my job and I go spend money at the grocery store or something like that. Finances is actually understanding the whole macro economy, the history of it, because the Stoics, if you do some research on who the Stoics were, like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and all these great philosophers from the Greek period, Greek Roman era, they basically experienced a lot and went through a lot, and went through a period that made them think about why we have the economy we have today. I mean, they basically were the guinea pigs of what everybody tried at that time, and then they were able to attach a motive or discover a motive for every action that we take, and based on that, they're able to develop systems that were later adopted into, an economic system, a political system that that the world generally uses today. And it's interesting how people who were not part of the Stoic philosophy or really wasn't attached to, because the Stoic philosophy is more related to the Western world. You go to the East, they're more Tao. Their economic system is a little bit different. It's a little bit more political and less economic. And we'll talk about that in a second. So that brings me down here to the balance. I like to call this the balance. If you look here, when it comes to the Jedi philosophy, it pretty much deals with the balance between being, worrying about being selfless and being selfish. So I should have wrote down this here. But anyways, so selfless means that we're compassionate, we're thinking about other people, and that's just maybe more than our immediate family member, or more than just maybe a mate that we might have. As far as selfishness is concerned, to some degree, we have to be selfish because that's part of our survival. And selfishness, because our selfishness is attached to ego, and ego is more or less attached to survival, which means it's an instinct. Then, at some degree, we have to be selfish. I mean, we have to, take care of ourselves. We have to obviously, feed ourselves. We have to clothe ourselves and shelter ourselves. So, and that's what motivates us to take action. However, that can get out of balance when we go beyond survival, or when our motives go beyond just those basic things, and a lot of that has to do with because when we do take action, some things are created. That's how creation comes about, is through taking action, and then once something's created, obviously there was some investment in there, so we become attached to it. We become attached to what we created, whether it's a relationship, whether it's business that we're doing, whatever. We become attached to it to some degree, and that attachment is it's a little bit, if not way to the extreme, beyond what our survival needs are. And that's how we get out of balance. So if we apply Jedi philosophy when it comes to, our relationships, then we'll able to make the right decisions when it comes to relationships. We'll be able to let go of things, people, situations, experiences that may cause us to be more selfish. So we're going to learn a lot about this because this is real personal to people. A lot of people really don't understand where the suffering is coming from, and that brings us to the Tao philosophy, because the Tao, really talks about not recognizing that principle, but when we're not compassionate and we're more selfish, we like Yoda said in the movie Star Wars, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, and that's because everything that we do is based on fear. Even just the fact of selfishness, people might not realize this, but selfishness is absolutely related. It's rooted in fear, and fear is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Fear is core to our survival. Again, it's the ego. It's we have it. If we weren't afraid that we would go hungry, we could die. We could go hungry and we could die. So that fear protects us. But at the same time, when that fear goes up and beyond our basic survival needs, then it's a problem. So, but on the other hand, we could be, passive. Just as I mentioned, if we don't take care of ourselves, we don't feed ourselves. If we're too selfless, if we're thinking, well, I'm just going to give everything that I have to other people and not take care of ourselves, and that could cause us suffering too. And a lot of times, people who do that at some point may, suffer emotionally because they'll start to feel like a victim, and they'll start to feel like, what's the point of living? If they're constantly just having to give everything to everybody. So they want to have a reason for living, and obviously that reason is going to be a little bit more than just surviving. So, but the trick is to balance that, and we have to do that by coming up with ways that we can satisfy our ego while at the same time benefiting the whole. And we'll talk more about that. So that brings us to the Tao part here when it comes to diet and exercise. A lot of people think that getting your health together sounds impossible. It sounds like, where's the motivation going to come from? Where's the willpower going to come from? And I like this the Tao philosophy, and this actually, when you look at all of them, I like the idea that we're not really looking for motivation. Motivation, you want to learn from Jedi philosophy and some of these others, that motivation and willpower and that kind of stuff, that's all short-lived. That's all comes from our desire to try to take action in the moment. And the problem with that is it's unsustainable. So, it's good for the moment. Again, it's that fight or flight. It goes back to fear. But, it's not sustainable. So that's why, all these self-help gurus and all of this, these motivational speakers and whatnot, they sound good. They may help you in the moment, while you're there at the seminar and jumping up, rah, 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 and all that. But when you go home, you don't have anybody, walking around on stage with a headset, talking about, get up off your ass and take action. I mean, now you're on your own, and there's actually a better way to, I want to say motivated, but there's a better way to take care of yourself, take care of your diet and exercise without relying on being motivated by someone yelling at you and screaming at you and telling you to do this and this and that. There are ways that are actually kind of permanent. At least permanent as far as you continue the principles involved without giving up. So we're going to talk more about that. One more thing about the diet and exercise. A lot of people think that, well, what could be wrong with too much exercise? Well, if we're exercising to the point where it's taking up too much of our time, or we're doing it for reasons that, again, is more bent towards selfishness and trying to show off and look good to to other people, to be judged, then that could be a problem. So there's a balance. I mean, we obviously want to look good, but we want to stay balanced, because at any point, if that creeps into some of the other stuff where we do things to our diet that's too extreme, then that can cause us a problem. And then, of course, our diet too. I mean, the diet's all about caloric intake, that sort of thing. But it's even deeper than that. There's several diets out there. I myself follow the ketogenic diet, and we'll talk more about why I do that because of um, the way it burns fat and so forth. But at the same time, we can abuse these things, and when we abuse these things, then we're actually coming out of balance, and we're not really following the Tao philosophy, which is, understand that if you do too much of one thing, you're going to get the exact opposite on the other end. What you don't want on the other end is going to happen, and it's going to be to the same degree as what you think you're, being good at. So we'll talk more about why diet is important and how to engineer your diet and engineer your exercise. A lot of people don't realize that there's a way to engineer your diet, and that's why I like Taoist philosophy, because it's here health seems like it's something kind of abstract, but actually there's an opposite side to that. There's an engineering side to our health, and we'll talk more about the details and how that is. So so that brings us to this last one here, Stoic philosophy, which I mentioned before, how I like to use that in relation to political / economy. And I want to talk a lot of history about this. In the political realm, we don't think of our finances having to do with politics, but and I'm not talking about some politician passes a tax cut or hands out a stimulus check or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how the politics from history have shaped the economy at least we use in the Western world, and how that's different than what's used in the Eastern world. A lot of ideas. Well, first of all, we have to recognize that everything's been tried under the sun as far as political economy. We may think that there's some new way to do things. We may think that some ways are better, but trust me when I say this, that whatever idea that you come up with as far as political economies has already been tried before, and it's just some variation of what is a basic principle of economy, and that is basically you either are more controlled in the individual aspect of your finances, or the state, and the state could be, monarchy, it could be, the government, obviously, whether it's a democratically elected government, or whether it's, centrally planned government, all those have an effect on our economy and our finances, and it's very important that we understand what type of system that we're in. There's only basically two systems. I mean, either the system is geared towards our individual, what we're allowed to control individually, and as opposed to what's allowed, or as opposed to what's controlled by the state. And in Stoic philosophy, you learn from Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and some of these others, that there are things that we can control and there's things that we can't control. It's best to focus on what we can control, which is ourselves. So it's very important to understand which type of system are we in? Are we in a more control and command type of economy, or are we more of an individualistic economy where we're in control? And even in a more individualistic type of economy where we think we're in control, it's ultimately there is a control system that gives us the illusion that we're in control. But at the end of the day, they're kind of both systems kind of have the same result. Now, what seems like the results are different is because the way the systems are executed, and that's what makes the difference. Whether the system is more command control or whether the system is more, gives you the illusion that you're in control. But ultimately, the result is similar. And then there's obviously another factor too, because in Stoic philosophy you'll learn that history will always play a role in the present and in the future. And because we can't control neither the past, the present, or we can control the present, but we can't control the future. If we fail to realize that, the role of history is, beyond our control, then we're going to do one of two things. Either we're going to seek ways to gain enough power in order to change the system, and then we'll just end up repeating history that's already been tried before, or we're not going to understand history, or we're not going to care about it, or not think why it has any relevance to us, and we're going to be frustrated as a result. And then we're going to, make stupid financial mistakes. We're going to do things that we think are in our best interest, but in actuality, they're mistakes because we're ignorant of history and why the political system that we have today and the economic system we have today is a result of a role history is playing in our lives and our present. And so that will also too give us a clear lens, a clear idea of what we can't control. Because a lot of people don't understand what we can control. People think that, we have the freedom to do this, we have freedom to do that. But if you don't understand the history, then you might not realize what you really do have control of. And to kind of give you a little heads up, it's more likely that you'll find out that there's very little we have control as far as the economy. Even our own finances, there's very, very little control. Sure, we can go maybe buy a shirt or something at a department store or something, but how we make the money to do so, and how we go about actually making that purchase, there's a lot of stuff there that's beyond our control. And if we don't understand that, we can make decisions that will affect us in the future in a negative way. So anyways, this is kind of my overview of Spider by Venom philosophy. Obviously there's a lot of information here. This free online course is going to kind of walk you through that. And then, I'm having a website built. It's called spiderbyvenom.com. And it's going to have, obviously all this information, and it's going to have specific diet recipes, and I'm even coming up with a kit, a ration kit, and I'm calling it, to kind of, hold your hand and guide you along in your efforts to balance your diet and exercise. And we're just gonna, share a lot of information on how this works, and my objective is not to change your beliefs or anything like that, or because it has nothing really to do with religion at all, um, but it's just basically to help you gain peace of mind. All three of these philosophies, what they most talk about and what they most have in common is this never-ending quest to have peace of mind, to have less suffering, emotional suffering, to have more compassion, and basically to be a more mature human being. At any age, a young person can, if they take the time out to understand this stuff, they can have the wisdom of an old man that's lived through, World War II, or who knows what kind of amazing experiences an older man might have. But a young man could go through this material and actually have just as much wisdom as someone a lot older than him. So anyways, we're gonna talk about this stuff, and then we're gonna hopefully I can try to explain it the best way for you to understand it, and then hopefully you'll get the peace of mind that you're looking for.